Swift is a big deal. She's an A-list singer. So she's definitely going to have some signs in her chart of being a big deal singer. So the chance of Taylor Swift having an almost empty second house with one tiny little creative asteroid in it, I'm just telling you, slim to none. Welcome back to the Wilding Astro Tarot YouTube channel for a little astrology video on Taylor Swift's birth chart. If you've ever looked at Taylor Swift's birth chart online, most of them have a birth time accuracy poor little note on them because we don't know Taylor Swift's accurate birth time. She's being cryptic, as she likes to do, and there's these kind of like two very dominant theories about what her birth chart actually looks like. The first is that she's a Capricorn rising, and the second is that she's a Scorpio rising. As far as I know, the Capricorn rising has existed for a long time, since she was first in the public eye, and the Scorpio rising birth chart is a more recent development. I'm not actually sure how the two made it into the mainstream, but basically, ever since I've been practicing astrology professionally, I've taken her Scorpio rising to be true. Just based on what the chart looks like to me, it seems more accurate. And so in today's video, I'm going to go through the big three things, the big three major issues with her being a Capricorn rising, why I just don't think it can be her rising sign. And explaining how the Scorpio rising sign is just a much better fit. So yeah, for today's video, we're going through the big three things that I see personally in her chart that would indicate that she's more of a Scorpio rising than a Capricorn rising. So if you want to know what my big three reasons are for why I think she is a Scorpio rising, let's get into the video. Okay, so the first major issue I see personally with Taylor Swift being a Capricorn rising is what that would do to her second house. Now, if you're not familiar with the second house, it rules over things like the voice. So a lot of singers have really strong second houses. Britney Spears has her Jupiter in the second house. Kelsey Ballerini has her Jupiter in the second house. She also has her Pars Fortune, which is the most abundant placement in the whole chart, in her second house. Carrie Fletcher has her Jupiter and her North Node in her second house. You see a pattern with singers that they have very strong second houses. So for a singer as big as Taylor, who is a household name, who is an A-list singer, to have no placement in her second house, apart from one tiny little asteroid, it is a creative asteroid, but unless it's the destined asteroid, I'm just like, it's a no from me. Like, it's just a big red flag that the rising sign is wrong. Because like, you would have to have so many other things happening in the aspects in other houses to make a singer with a weak second house, especially as big as she is. You'd have to have like all of these Uranus-Venus aspects and things like that to try and create a singer with an empty second house. So the second house is the first really big red flag. Using the Scorpio birth time, you can see that her Capricorn stellium actually falls in the second house, and it includes her Venus, which is an amplifying energy, as well as her Mercury. And it makes a lot more sense for her to be a Scorpio rising. As kind of an add-on thought, the third house would also be empty if she had a Capricorn rising. And the reason why this is a problem is because the third house governs public relations. So big public relations energy falls in the third house. So people with lots of third house placements usually are really good at PR stuff. They usually have a natural talent for it. And like, Taylor's got a whole fandom that does her PR for her, that are making videos, that are sharing like tweets, sharing TikToks. Like, there's a big fan base like doing that for her. And for her to have no placements in the third house, indicating not a strong kind of PR presence, it's it's kind of a red flag. I'm not going to lie to you. I will say the one redeeming quality in terms of Taylor being a Capricorn rising is that she would have Aries on the 3rd house, which would be like kind of being ahead of the curve and being innovative, which I would say she is. So I would say that's a redeeming quality, but the fact that there's no placements in it when she at least appears so good at it, it's just a bit of a red flag. But if you look at her Scorpio rising chart, she actually has a North Node at a fame degree in the 3rd house. And I would say personally that she's very famous, and part of her purpose and destiny in this lifetime is doing what she does in terms of public relations and like doing this like kind of conspiracy theory-esque kind of PR, especially that because the 3rd house is then governed by Aquarius, which governs like social media, technology, community, the Swiftie community. It is like ride or die. And I feel like that makes the most sense to be on the 3rd house and to have her purpose North Node in that house at a fame degree, and for her to be famous for kind of the PR kind of stuff that she does in her career. It just makes way, way, way more sense to me. Yeah, that she would be a Aquarius 3rd house with a North Node in there, doing all of the crazy stuff that she does, and encouraging this big online community that like literally talks about it all the time. Like she doesn't have to like appear anywhere really necessarily at all. It's like a machine that basically feeds itself. And for me, Aquarius on the 3rd house makes way more sense for that than an empty 3rd house, even if Aries is there. So the next major issue with Taylor Swift being a Capricorn rising is what that means for her MC. Now the MC is super, super, super important, and 100% where you would look next for a famous singer after you look at the 2nd house, because the MC line marks the highest point in the chart of the sky at the time of our birth, marks the point in the chart that is our most public point in our chart, so how the public perceives us. It also governs things like reputation, social status, things like that, and kind of your highest glory in life. So anyone who's famous, anyone who's in the public eye in a major way, is going to have a lot of stuff going on with their MC line. No matter what else they have going on, no matter if they're a singer and they have a strong 2nd house, if they're a writer, they have a strong 3rd house, whatever it is, just general fame, general being in the public eye, general like being perceived by the public, it's all going to come down to that MC, which is why it's more important to think about what's going on with the MC before you really think about the rising sign, because us as the public consuming Taylor Swift as the brand, who she is in terms of her MC is going to be the most digestible to us. We're going to be more perceptive about her MC energy than we are necessarily going to be perceptive about her rising sign energy, because her rising sign energy, first of all, much more personal, much less in the public eye, and also the rising sign is who we rise into in life over the course of our life and who we kind of grow into, so that you kind of look at with more time. However, the MC line especially is more relevant to how we, the public, are perceiving her. So that's definitely somewhere major you want to look. Any celebrities. Kim Kardashian has Jupiter and Venus conjunct her MC line. There's a lot going on there. For Taylor, because she's such a household name, she's an A-list singer, like she's a big, big, big deal. She needs to have a lot of stuff going on with the MC, and that's going to be a clue about which rising sign is correct based on what that means for her MC line. So if Taylor is a Capricorn rising, that means she will have a Scorpio MC. And if she's a Scorpio rising, that means she will have a Virgo MC. And so the thing about both of these MC possibilities is that they're very similar in terms of the likelihood that they could be her MC line, because there is a lot of major stuff going on with either of those lines. First of all, if she's Capricorn rising and has a Scorpio MC, that means all of her Scorpio placements are in her 10th house and close to her MC line. It also means all of her Cancer placements are trining her MC line, which a lot of people that have a strong public presence have lots of trines to their MC or lots of placements in the 10th house. However, if she's a Virgo rising, that means that all of her Capricorn placements also trine her MC. So either way, you've got lots of energy trining the MC, which is a really positive indicator that you're on the right track. So we kind of have to look at it in more detail and look at exactly which placements would be trining the MC or in the 10th house and what that would mean. Okay, so let's start with the Capricorn rising Scorpio MC. This would mean that she has Lilith, Juno, and Pluto all in her 10th house. The Lilith placement is quite a feministy energy, but in Scorpio it's like super intense. And I just don't see Taylor kind of with that initial sweetness so early on and like taking so long to get into that reputation energy with a Scorpio Lilith in the 10th house. Like I think that would have kicked into gear much sooner, and while she's very much like feminist icon these days, I think it just took too much time for that to be super believable. The other thing that's going on in this house is there's a Juno asteroid in the 10th house. Now people do project onto her things about like her being like wifey energy, like she's with this guy, she's with that guy, she's with this girl, is she gonna like tie it down to anyone, blah 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 blah. Like people do project that onto her, but it makes more sense for that placement to be in the 12th house, because the 12th house deals more with projection than it does to do with the 10th house, because the 10th house is like, it's going to be a bit more truthful, and I just don't see her as a kind of wifey energy, even if it is in Scorpio. Whereas if she's a Scorpio rising, her Juno placement would be in the 12th house. 12th house, naturally governed by Pisces, the most reflective sign of the zodiac. And Pisces is where there's lots of projection. So it would make more sense that people were projecting that onto her, which is the whole premise of the Lavender Haze video, song and music video. It would just make so much more sense for Juno to be in the 12th house. And then Pluto in the 10th, like I don't know if she's done anything like majorly, like I don't think she's done anything majorly transformative yet. I think she will, but I just think if you had Pluto in the 10th house, I think she'd be like, first of all, much more public about some of her relationships with women. And I just don't think it would be such a secret. But if it was in the 12th house, that would give her more time. That would give her time to have all these like secret things and not necessarily challenge the status quo for a long time, because the 12th house deals with like the conditioning. And so it would make more sense for her to kind of be biding her time with that. Whereas if it was in the 10th, and it was just so, it's not super close to her MC, but like close enough to her MC that it should be affecting it, I think she'd be doing something like challenging the power systems a little bit more, a little bit sooner. It's kind of like giving similar energy to the Lilith. I just think we'd see it more in her career, because her career's been super long. I think we would have seen it by now. The other thing that's like a major redeeming quality of having her Scorpio in Scorpio MC is that Jupiter would then trine her MC. It wouldn't probably be like super tight, but it would be affecting it. And Jupiter trines to the MC is really powerful for, you know, singers. Any amplifying energy. So North Nodes, Jupiters, Venuses, all really positive to be trining the MC. Pars Fortune, Destined Asteroid, either trining or like conjunct, like really powerful for people in the public eye. However, that would also mean her moon trines her MC, and that would be just so hard to keep secrets. If she had a Cancer moon trining her MC, it'd be so hard for her to keep secrets. Like her kind of inner emotional world would be much more in the public eye. Also, like her Pars Fortune and Chiron would be trining her MC, and so like I think just more of her would be in the public eye, because Chiron's obviously the healer energy, wounded healer, so there's like personal hurt would be more in the public eye, which it seems like she deals with a lot of that privately. The Pars Fortune, basically this placement summarizes your rising sign, sun sign, and moon sign. It summarizes your big three to essentially be like, this is why you've been given the three placements that you've been given. It's like a lot tied to do with your destiny and things like that. So like that kind of makes sense if she had a Pars Fortune trining her MC, but yeah, I just think we would see more of her. Now, if we look at her Scorpio rising and Virgo MC, it's telling a very different story. If you look at her Virgo MC Scorpio rising chart, it just makes a lot more sense. The biggest green flag, first and foremost, is Virgo's obviously known for being quite analytical, and Taylor literally finished off her most recent album with the track Mastermind. Big Virgo MC energy. Considering that like this album is like the end of her career so far, like the end of all of these eras, and she's decided to finish it, to summarize it with a Mastermind track, like big Virgo MC energy, first of all. The second thing, adding on to that, is that the ruler of Virgo is Mercury, and that would mean that the ruler of her MC line and her 10th house of career is her Capricorn Mercury in the second house, the singing house. Career, singer. Singer as a career. Also, Capricorn Mercury is obviously, Mercury's to do with like communication, writing. She's well known for being a good lyricist. Makes so much more sense for a 10th house of career to have Mercury as its ruler, let alone it being in Capricorn, which is another very hardworking, so climbing like energy, like the mountain goat, climbs the mountain, wants to reach the top. Taylor is literally incessant about being like the best artist in the world. And she's completing feats that are just unbelievable to anyone else in this sort of career. Like, she's getting up there. And if you look back at her Capricorn rising Scorpio MC line, it's just like it wouldn't be giving the same thing. Like, first of all, her career line would be ruled by Mars in the 11th house, which is more about like being passionate about community. But she's not, like, I'm not saying that she's not passionate about her fans, but I don't think that's the main point of what she does. Like, I think the main point is really about being the best at her craft, like being the best singer, being the best writer. Like, it just makes way more sense for her to be a Virgo MC with her her ruler in the second house of singing, to do with like, you know, communication in a career orientated sign. Like, it just makes way more sense. And what's more is they're exactly trining each other to the degree. An exact trine, to the degree, super rare. Like, not even 1 degree difference, like super rare, but also super powerful for that to be the case, which would explain why she's such a big household name and like why she's as big as she is. Like, to have the MC ruler trining to exactly, like, it's just like kind of obvious, you know what I'm saying? What's more, I think this is potentially the redeeming factor in why I think a lot of people think she's a Scorpio MC, is that her MC actually sits at a Scorpio degree, and so therefore does her like MC ruler Mercury. They're both exactly at 8 degrees, which is a Scorpio ruled degree, which is going to add in, after you've taken into account the kind of like mastermind, climbing to the top, like career orientated, like perfecting my craft, like singer, songwriter kind of vibe. After you've taken that into account, the secondary energy is going to be Scorpio-ish. It's going to be then a little bit devious, cunning, and like all the secrecy stuff's going to start to come up after that. And so to me, it does make sense why people think she's a Scorpio MC, because there's kind of that secondary flavor. It's just the major flavor is that first energy that we talked about. Scorpio is definitely there, but it's not the major current. It's like the undercurrent, if you will. So yeah, I will say that's the redeeming factor for people thinking she's a Scorpio MC. Like, it does kind of make sense in the sense that like the energy's there on her real MC, according to my opinion. But yeah, it's just not the major energy. It doesn't make sense to be the major energy. Being a Virgo MC means that her entire Capricorn stellium therefore feeds into her 10th house of career. And so there's just lots of strong energies that are enhancing her MC. Similarly to if she was a Scorpio rising, that all the Scorpio and Cancer placements would be enhancing her MC. Now she's just getting it mostly from that Capricorn stellium. And honestly, I just think it makes sense. Because first of all, if she's a Scorpio rising, that would also change her past fortune, because remember, past fortune summarizes your rising sign, sun, and moon sign. So if a rising sign changes, that sign is going to change. And so either way, it's still trining her MC. So if she's a Scorpio rising, she's a Taurus past fortune, and that Taurus past fortune is trining her MC. So either way, all of her is like trining her MC. However, she doesn't have any other Taurus placements. And so while obviously more of her is going to make it into the public eye if there's any relationship between the past fortune and the MC, when the past fortune is kind of in a random sign, I feel like it's going to be more giving that like kind of Jupiter, Venus-y North Node enhancement, and less like, it's going to be less revealing, because if she had a Cancer past fortune, she has like a very personal past fortune placement, which is the moon, there'd just be like, she wouldn't be able to keep much of herself a secret, because more of that, like both of them together, it just would be too hard for her to keep secrets. However, the past fortune on its own, and there's no kind of like placements around it that would be just like very telling of who she is as a person, I think it'd be easier for her to have secrets, first of all, but also you got more amplification. Also though, the past fortune would sit at the 15th degree, which is a Gemini ruled degree, which is more again about speaking, writing, public relations, things like that. It just makes sense for that to be trining her MC. And then all the Capricorn placements then also trining the MC. I will say though, like either way, because you have the past fortune trining the MC, this is like just good for career. Like any past fortune MC or 10th house like vibe is going to be good for a career in the public eye. However, I will say that kind of the major difference between the trines to the MC is with the Capricorn rising, she has a Jupiter trine to the MC, and with the Scorpio rising, she has a Saturn trine to the MC. And they're going to be two very different energies. So Jupiter like rewards based on like nothing. Everyone's deserving of like fame, success, like money, whatever, no matter what. Like there's no requirements. You just get because you get. Saturn, however, is like tough love. It will it will only reward hard work, perseverance, integrity, honesty, things like that. Not based. It's merit based. It's not based on inherent value or anything inherent. And so when Saturn trines the MC, usually you see their career take off a lot more after their Saturn return. Whereas Jupiter trining the MC, there'd be no difference. Like before and after the Saturn return, they'd be just as successful. And I would say Taylor was more successful after a Saturn return than before it. Like there is a difference between before and after. So I think it just makes more sense for Saturn to be trining her MC and having that delay but doesn't deny reward based on effort and merit and perseverance, especially in the face of hardship. Like that's very Saturnian. That's not Jupiter energy. So it makes more sense for the Saturn to be acting on the MC than it does for the Jupiter to be acting on the MC. So I just find it very hard to believe that she's had this Jupiter energy on the MC all the time. I find it very easy to believe that Saturn is trining the MC. Also, it's a Saturn in domicile. It's Saturn in its sign of rulership. Jupiter like goes good in Cancer too, but yeah, like just the Saturn energy in Capricorn is so strong. It just would make a lot of sense for it to be that, you know what I'm saying? Last thing I'll say about the difference between the MC lines is the MC has a lot to do with like what looks good on us aesthetically. Like you want to look at kind of Venus and MC line mostly, especially for people in the public eye. Like rising sign will have a bit to do with it as well. You can look at things like Lilith and stuff as well, but the MC will have a big influence on how you're perceived publicly and kind of what looks good on you in the public eye. And so the other issue with the Scorpio MC line is like that she would look really good in reputation stuff and midnight stuff, kind of that more dark aesthetic, more witchy aesthetic, more like, yeah, kind of like dark and I don't know, just, yeah, dark and kind of like romantic, but and like kind of sexual would look good. However, the Virgo MC, this is someone who looks good in like earthy stuff, florals, and I have to say, like, of all of Taylor's looks, like especially when you look at her set list for, or her set outfits for like the folklore and evermore stuff that she's playing on tour now, like it just really suits her vibe. Like if you look at what she wears outside of her kind of like public facing persona, it's lots of like earthy stuff, like that's what she looks really good in. And so to me that makes more sense for a Virgo MC. Doesn't make a lot of sense for the Scorpio MC, and I'm not saying she doesn't look good in the Reputation Midnight stuff, because she does. She can pull off anything, but it's a very different vibe. And I just think she looks so, it just looks effortless. Like the Evermore folklore stuff looks so effortless on her. Whereas the Midnights and Reputation stuff, it looks like she's trying to do something, which she is. It doesn't look as effortless, and that's a big red flag when it comes to the MC. If she was a Scorpio MC, the public would thirst over her as like a sex symbol a lot more. Because Scorpio is just like super sexual, it's ruled by Mars. And so it would make more sense that people like wanted her in a physical way. And I'm not saying she's not sexy, because she is, like, especially in her era's set, like gorgeous, beautiful woman. Like, of course we should all thirst over her, but it's just like not the dominant thing about her in the public eye. People respect her more as like an artist, I would say, and like being clever, strategic, which is all that more Virgo MC energy. And if she was strong Scorpio, I don't think people would care about that. I don't think people would necessarily respect her as much as they do as the artist that she is, especially Swifties. I think they'd just be like thirsty people that would follow her, basically. Also, one of the other things about your MC, it can show you what body parts look good highlighted. And kind of in a similar vein, Scorpio MC would be like, you just need to look super sexual all the time, which I don't think Taylor necessarily does look super sexual all the time. And I don't think like she necessarily benefits from when she does go super sexual, if that makes sense. Like she does, but I just don't think it would be in as major a way, because obviously sex sells, but I just think people would literally die. People do die, but I'm trying to say here's the contrast. This is what might be what brings it home. So people with Virgo MCs, Virgo rules the kind of stomachish area, cinched waist. Anyone with Virgo, Venus, MC, rising, they're going to look good when you focus on cinching their waist. And Taylor's famous for a midriff moment. I feel like that explains it better rather than trying to explain it the other way. That just makes more sense if that's better. It's like earthy stuff looks good on her, midriff looks good on her, and like a lot of the Reputation and Midnight stuff actually highlights the midriff, which is actually Virgo MC energy, so that's kind of like snaking its way into the Scorpio energy. So that's what I think's going on there. That was a bit of a mess. That was probably the most messy part of this video, but hopefully that made a lot of sense in terms of like why all these things to do with their MC just makes way more sense for a Virgo MC than it does for a Scorpio MC. And now we can move on. Now that we're moving on to the last issue that I have with Taylor being a Capricorn rising, I remember where I was going with this, and it explains why we got a little bit messy there at the end, because the rising sign is that kind of like secondary what looks good on you energy, among other things, which we'll get into in a minute. But if she's a Virgo MC, then she's a Scorpio rising, which is kind of explains why I was having this trouble with like, she is sexual, but like there's this other energy that's stronger. Like that's what I meant to mean. The MC energy is strong. This like Virgo kind of like earthy energy is very strong, but there is this kind of like sexual undercurrent, which is that Scorpio energy, which is her rising sign. Which like, I think giving you a personal example might help. I'm a Virgo rising Gemini MC, and so like people a lot of the time, I think in the public eye, appreciate me for my mind, my intellect, things like that, and I also tend to get compliments on like my hands, my fingers. People ask me what color my nail polish is, where I got my rings from, which is Gemini energy. Gemini rules the hands, the whole arms really, but Then secondary, my Virgo rising, like I look really good with a cinch waist. Like if you cinch my waist, like that's aesthetically, that's me like good to go. But people don't normally comment on that first. It's more of like a secondary thing. First, they notice the Gemini MC stuff, which I think is the same for Taylor. Like people notice that like mastermind Virgo energy, then also the Virgo like kind of midriff, cinch waist, kind of earthy kind of tones thing. Gemini is also ethereal, which is a sidebar. Like I look better in like more ethereal stuff, and also black. But then secondary, I get comments on the Virgo cinched waist, and she's obviously as a secondary energy, like perceived as this like kind of sexual being, especially because she has would have Mars conjunct her rising sign. So that kind of explains why that last bit got a bit messy, because I really forgot where I was going with it. And had I remembered, I probably would have done a better job both explaining it and then segueing into this next point, which is about the rising sign. And so the other thing we need to talk about with the rising sign is also its other meaning, which is like who we rise into, who we grow into in this life. And so what you would expect if someone is a Capricorn rising, you would see them kind of growing into a more business orientated person. But also a Capricorn rising is Saturn ruled, and they would like be growing into this energy of like prioritizing Saturnian things. So like integrity, hard work, kind of like, it's like a very head down bum up energy. It's not super like fame orientated, I would say. Like doesn't really care about who gets the credit. They just want to do good hard work. Taylor kind of cares about the credit a lot for her to be a Capricorn rising. And for her to be Saturn ruled, I don't think she'd lie as much as she does. I mean, like the whole fiasco with like her calling the glitter that she bleeds in the anti-hero music video Midnight Blue when it's very clearly purple, that's not Capricorn rising energy. That's not Saturn ruled energy. Saturn ruled energy does not lie. Whereas a Scorpio rising, so growing into someone who like challenges the status quo, who breaks down systems, who is a bit more cunning, a bit more clever, a bit more devious, let's say. I'm just saying it makes a lot more sense for her to be growing into that energy than it does make sense for her to be growing into the Capricorn energy. Either way, she would have her ruler in the first house, which I think is kind of dope for her, and it just makes sense for her to have her ruler in the first house. But yeah, I just really think she's growing into the Scorpio energy, growing into challenging the status quo. Scorpio, like, it's going to break down systems. It's going to go where the taboo is. And I don't think she did that so young in her career, but she's growing into it. Whereas I think the Capricorn rising and the Saturn energy was maybe a bit more what she seemed like early on in her career, which is maybe why we've had this idea of her chart for a lot longer when she was really young and she wouldn't have fully come into her rising sign yet, especially before her Saturn return. If she's Saturn ruled, like I think it makes sense why people thought that. But I think now seeing how she's kind of grown and progressed in her career, it just doesn't make sense that that is actually her rising sign. Yeah, because the rising sign is who you grow into, and I see her growing into this person who's much more clever, willing to lie, also challenging a lot of the systems as they age, but definitely didn't do it young. And yeah, Capricorn rising, I don't see her growing into this kind of head down, bum up, career orientated energy. I see her wanting to win, which is more Scorpio rising, more Mars ruled, less Saturn ruled. So yeah, I just don't think it makes sense for her to be, in terms of like who she is, who she's growing into, who she's rising into, which is the whole point of the rising sign, makes a lot more sense for her to be a Scorpio rising. And I will say as well, like, I think one of the other reasons why people maybe got a bit confused and thought she might have been a Capricorn rising is because Capricorn risings are known for being quite, like, quote unquote, bony, quite thin. But I think potentially we're just picking up on disordered eating patterns, and like body issues rather than that being her actual rising sign and that actually being the natural state of her body. I just physically don't see that for her if you were to kind of imagine a scenario where she didn't have those issues. I just don't think she would look like a Capricorn rising in that case. I think she looks like a Capricorn rising for a reason. But I think especially in the face, she looks like a Scorpio rising. Yeah, like that kind of, I don't know, it's something in the eyes. That's Scorpio rising energy. There's kind of like this little kind of, a little bit devious, a little bit mischievous kind of look of Scorpio risings. And yeah, I think that just makes so much more sense for her and like fits her a lot better. They're like the three major issues I have with her being a quote unquote Capricorn rising, and also the three big reasons why I think she's a Scorpio rising. Obviously you can look at the rest of her chart. There's lots of other things in her chart that would be a giveaway one way or another. In my opinion, a giveaway that she's a Scorpio rising. But I think those are the big three, and those are the most convincing points in terms of her being a Scorpio rising. And I will say as a fun fact, the Scorpio rising birth time adds up to 13, which is her birth date and obviously her number. So it is just a little bit cute. And I do love that for her. Whereas the Capricorn rising isn't as cute in that way. But yeah, there's other things like that you could go into if you wanted to do a full chart analysis, but I would say just based on the information we have, what we can see, the Scorpio rising makes way more sense. And so those are my reasons. If you want a longer video, maybe I'll do it. Just let me know in the comments. If I get enough requests, I might do a longer video explaining more stuff from her chart about why I think she's a Scorpio rising, but I think this really summarizes it. This really, in my opinion, does a good job of explaining why I think she is a Scorpio rising. And if she's not, I'll be extremely surprised. I wouldn't be not at all surprised if she's not a Capricorn rising. I'll be like, yeah, duh. But if she's not a Scorpio rising, I will be so surprised. Like it would literally blow my mind, because I cannot see, like I've tried to look at her chart a million ways and I'm like, I can't see how this would not be what she is, you know, like it just doesn't make sense. Anything else doesn't make sense. I'm just like, surely it has to be this. But yeah, that's all I have for you today. I hope you found it helpful. I hope you learned some things about reading people's charts and like how to go about finding the orientation or the suspected orientation. And I would love if you can like, comment, and subscribe, especially if you found it helpful. I would really appreciate it. It really helps me with the YouTube algorithm. But until we see each other again, thank you so much for watching, and ciao.